seeking a weakness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pony Fanfiction Theater. I'm your host Nate, the narrator, and with me is John as always. And we're going to be reading a shipping/random fic. It is called Seeking a Weakness. Read along if you like, and the description. Let's begin. It was past dusk when the great and powerful Trixie leaned a ladder against the back wall of a library treehouse. Even though she had a disguise spell on herself, she had to be careful that nobody saw her actions. Getting arrested was the last thing she needed now. Trixie crept up the ladder into the balcony. Using her great and powerful magic, she opened a simple latch lock and stifled a giggle as she stepped inside. She had done it. She had made it into the home base of her arch-nemesis. The distraction Trixie had set up for Twilight would ensure her absence for a few more hours. Along with that baby dragon servant of hers, finally she would discover why Twilight Sparkle was so much more powerful than the other unicorns. She stood in the center in the room for a moment, chanting her incantation. Completion of the spell created a pulsating orb of pale blue light, which floated through the room. This specially made spell was created to direct the caster to the most often used magical artifact in the immediate vicinity. Trixie reasoned that this would no doubt be the central hub of Twilight's resources. The spell led Trixie through the library into Twilight's bedroom, where it prominently slid under the bed and stopped. She thought it a bit odd, as that such an important secret would be hidden in a so obvious and mundane a place. Twilight must be able to sleep easier knowing her prime source of arcana was close at hand. It also made sense to have it available to access while sleeping. That was careful planning, she had to admit. Trixie reached under the bed to pull out a long, flat box, nearly the same size as the bed itself. She also thought it was strange that she could only detect a minor warning enchantment over the box. There were no arcane barriers, no invisibility shrouds, or even an alarm spell. There was just one small inhibited the invasion of dragons. Trixie studied it for a time before understanding that there really was nothing else behind the box. Surely Twilight was a fool for only protecting her secrets with a layer of slightly enchanted cardboard. Trixie whispered a word, and the blue orb floated up and increased its intensity enough to, illuminate the room. She smiled to herself as she pulled the lid off the box. Nothing can stop her now. She immediately lost her smile as she looked down at the countless magazines stacked very neatly into every available space inside of the cardboard container. This is... She reached down to bring one of the issues closer to make certain her eyes were not lying to her. There's no way. Her brows furrowed together as her mind tried to process what she was seeing. She read the cover out loud just to reaffirm what she was seeing. 74 pages of pure pony pleasure? This can't be right. What is all this? She stared blankly at the archive before realizing just what this might mean. My spell must be defective, and Twilight is a pervert? She stared unblinkingly at the loot collection. They're all mere magazines. Twilight likes dirty mere magazines? What? Her mind began to cramp as she struggled to take in the implications of her discovery. She continued to look down at the various issues spread out before her until one caught her eye. No! She reached over the sprawling collection and brought the offending document towards her. Adorning the cover was none other than Twilight Sparkle herself. She was clad all in black leather and was wearing a strange hat that looked like something stolen from a foreign military uniform. She had an evil smile with a riding crop between her teeth, while posed over some poor pony who was strapped into a straitjacket with a black bag over her head. Trixie stared for a moment, then, with an almost involuntary motion, she opened the magazine. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes were greeted with fillings attached to various devices that looked like they were made of more for a torture chamber than anything else. She finally got into a section concerning Twilight. She let her mind freeze over. She blinked. Down at the title of the page before her. The twilight hours of a great and powerful playmate. The blue pony stared down at the page after page of Twilight binding, abusing, and molesting a pony that looked like she could be Trixie's twin. She looked closer. It was more than just a close resemblance. Trixie had looked at herself in the mirror far too often to fail to realize that it was an exact copy of her in the pictures. What is going on? She stared at the moment longer before her reason returned to her. She put the still open book on the floor and began an incantation over it. The pages began to glow as her analysis of the spell went to work. The various forms of specifics of the spell within the book floated through her mind. Within moments, Trixie knew exactly what sort of magic lay before her. A sharp red hue crept into her complexion. This was dream magic. This was Twilight's fantasies recorded down on a magical paper bound in a magazine format. Her blush deepened as she looked back down in the various positions Twilight had imagined her being bound into. The machine she was attached to didn't even look like it would have actually functioned with the physics of the real world. As she picked up the book and her eyes fell on the remaining stacks still in the box, she suddenly felt that she had done something very wrong, even if it was to her arch-enemy. How many sleepless nights did the images of these pages represent? What other sorts of fetishes did Twilight have? And who did she want to share them with? From what Trixie recalled from her stalker reconnaissance, I don't know how to pronounce that word, I'll skip it. Spells. Twilight didn't have anything close to a light life. Mostly all of her days were usually spent in her books, and now it seemed that her nights were too spent in the same way. Trixie closed the book and placed it back on top of the pile before collecting the other she had shuffled through. Just then, the front door of the library opened.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Trixie panicked upon hearing Twilight's voice increase in volume when she entered home. Trixie snuffed out her own light spell just as the lights turned on the rest of the library. I don't care, Spike. It was obviously written by some pony who tried to pull a prank. I'm just glad we found that out sooner rather than later. We very well could have been following that trail till daybreak. The door closed and hoofsteps moved through the ground level. Trixie fumbled to restack the magazines. You don't think Pinkie Pie would pull something like that, do you? As Trixie put the last of the books back into the box, she heard something very heavy being set down onto a table. She was my first guess, but the whole thing didn't have her sense of fun to it. It was all just seemed more like a task for a sake of taking up time. Well, whatever. I'm tired now, and I know you are too. Hoofsteps mounted the stairs, as Trixie scrambled to close on the box. The lid slid on, and she shoved the box under the bed, just as Twilight reached up the top stair. Besides, Trixie pulled her hooves out of under the bed at the same time. She heard Twilight's gasp. Who are you? And what are you doing in my house?
Get out of my house!
Or I'll kill you! Trixie stood and turned to face her nemesis. Twilight looked honestly confused and alarmed. Her stare fell to the spot on the floor where Trixie had been sitting, and her eyes went wide. What are you doing? What were you doing under my bed? Trixie locked eyes with the purple unicorn in an indignant glare. Surely she couldn't have forgotten the most worthy rival she had ever faced in her life. Then she remembered the disguise spell that had neglected to remove. With a wave of her hoof, she dispelled the illusion and stood tall in her full glory. Ta-da! It is I, the great and powerful Trixie. What are you doing here? Trixie took a step forward while wearing her smuggest of grins. She decided the time to use her superior linguistic techniques to bluff her way out of the situation. The great and powerful Trixie has come to challenge you into a duel in an old order of, wait, answer my question. What were you doing here now while I was away? And what were you doing under my bed? This was not as the great powerful Trixie had planned. Twilight looked toward her bed again. What did you do? What did you see? Trixie opened her mouth to speak, but the response failed her. Instead, a visual blush spread across her cheeks, and Twilight's jaw dropped to the floor when she saw this. You saw! The great powerful Trixie sees all. There's surely nothing you didn't already know, unless you truly are a fool they claimed you to be. Are you admitting to be a fool? Trixie nearly stumbled as she walked back towards the nearest window. Twilight's expression shifted into a combination of shock and indignation as she realized what Trixie was trying to do. She refused to have her mental trains thrown off course by this nonsense. You saw it all, didn't you? Tears started to well up in Twilight's eyes, and so her own blush deepened. The great powerful Trixie doesn't know what you're talking about. She came to challenge you in that. What are you talking about, Twilight? What did she see? Hey, are you alright? Spike was at her side now, with a look of deep concern, as she saw tears running down Twilight's face. Get out! Get the hell out of my house! Or I'll kill you! The books on the shelf nearby nearly fell to the floor with the impact of Twilight's outburst. Trixie flinched as she started to turn to the window. Ah! Okay, the great powerful Trixie now retreats, but she will. Ow! Now! With this, Twilight launched a crackling black beam of lightning, streaking from her horn towards the invader. Trixie barely had time to create an impact shield in front of her before being blasted out the window with such force that she collided into a roof of a small shop on the opposite side of the road. Twilight stood seething, staring out of the broken window, which now had scorch marks adorning its frame. Spike stared up at her while huddling down, partially hiding behind a nearby chair. Twilight had allowed herself to catch her breath before speaking into her apprentice. Spike? Yes, Twilight? He didn't move from behind the chair. Do we still have that tome of memory erasure? Yes, I think it's go get it. But now, before she wakes up. The little dragon ran downstairs to retrieve the book, leaving Twilight to mumble angrily to herself. Why? Why did she go for the happy box? Why did she go for the happy box? She could have searched for anything else. Trixie awoke to the stars. They were very nice. Her first thought was that it had been such a long time since she had watched the stars like this. Then events began to filter back into her mind. She sat up with a groan and braced herself against the roof, waiting for the spinning in her head to stop. She opened and clenched her eyes, and just as the lavender spark of light flashed for a few feet in front of her, Twilight stood, peering down at her, looking a bit annoyed. You're awake. That's too bad, but it does give me time to apologize for what I did back there. Emotions clouded my judgment. I usually make every effort not to just blow up like that. Her horn started to glow as she levitated a book out of her saddlebag. Considering the current situation, though, I think my agitation is understandable. You know, Trixie said as she attempted to stand, it's not a big of a deal. I mean, I heard of lots of other ponies who are into, things that are. She lost her footing and slumped back onto the roof. Oh yes, there are, many in fact. However, none of them are the star pupil to Princess Celestia herself. If word got out about my studies into the magic of pornography, it would reflect bad on both the princesses and myself. Twilight flipped through the pages of the book and she spoke. But no matter, soon this will be all taken care of. What are you gonna do? Trixie looked up with her twitching fear in her eyes. She had heard quiet rumors in the underground wizard circles, just gossip really, of some of the stranger activities of the princess and her underlings. She had dismissed them as rubbish initially, but with Twilight standing over her now, her imagination went wild with the various things that she had overheard. Twilight sounded as she had almost forgotten the battered pony laying at her hooves. Oh, I'm just going to do a little magic, since that's what I do. She looked up from the book's pages. Oh, I have to borrow a bit of this too. Twilight's horn glowed again as the open wound on Trixie's shoulder bled out into the air. Trixie winced and looked up to see her blood floating away from her in a thin stream. Twilight intensified her focus, and the crimson liquid was fashioned into a magical rune circle which remained suspended in midair. As Twilight began whispering the magical phrases from the book, a brighter glow erupted from her horn and infused its light into the hovering circle. Suddenly, a tight beam of light shot out from the circle and center and hit directly into Trixie's forehead. What an electric shock that set her mane standing on end. Trixie fell unconscious without uttering a sound.